Can we choose the sex of our babies? Do we have any choice of hair or eye color, intelligence or musical abilities?
Old Lady Mexbrow with Lady Radna.
Until recently, the only way we could make perfect babies was to select our ideal partner and hope that the babies will inherit the best of both of us. The British aristocracy used to do this by having coming-out balls for their daughters.
I think the historical reason for having coming out balls was for the debutantes to meet their future husband and to mix among the people that their parents would like them to mix amongst.
Well, I suppose it was for young people to meet other young people of the same kind of background, and the children of parents who were already friends or acquaintances.
But science has increased our options. In New York, women whose partners are infertile can choose the father of their child from a sperm bank. For years, this has enabled childless couples to have a family. For a fee, they can choose from the hundreds of men who've donated their semen to the Idant Clinic. At the clinic, a semen analysis is done on all the donated sperm to ensure a high sperm count. If the sample passes the test, it's then packed into tiny tubes called straws.
Each donor is given his own straw according to his racial group. African Americans with brown straws, Eastern Indian with blue straws, Caucasians with white straws, and Oriental with pink straws.
The sperm can be stored for years by freezing it in liquid nitrogen. But how do women choose the father from the sperm bank?
The married women come in and select someone who is very much a look-alike for their husband. Whereas the single women who come in want somebody who they feel is their ideal man.
I was told that being that I had a son, it would be wise if they possibly matched the features with my first son. So in fact, I did bring a picture in, and they chose for me a donor that was blonde and blue-eyed and fair-skinned.
Sperm is only accepted once the donor's medical history has been investigated. If any close family members have had certain diseases, particularly genetic diseases, the donor's sperm will be rejected.
I don't know why, but I think it's a great choice that people have, whether you're gay, whether you're straight, a single mother. It's a great choice. It's controlled. You don't have to worry about disease. You might be skeptical of disease, but for the most part, you really don't have to worry about it. And the end product is
somebody
a
who
little
really
baby.
wants a baby. It's not just like any family, because we really wanted her more than most people who have a baby naturally.
It's possible that some clinics will enable people to choose the sex of their child by selecting male or female carrying sperm from a donor. But scientific developments could make even that choice seem very tame. If experiments which have been done with animals were applied to humans, the choice for selecting our children would be in a different league. These 9 frogs have been created in a laboratory without using sperm. They are genetically identical to each other. They only have one parent, and they're copies or clones of that parent. If this could ever be done with humans, men and women could be cloned to form children which are exact copies of themselves. Human cloning has been ruled out in the United Kingdom, but there are ways of interfering with animal cells which, if done with humans, will have an enormous influence on future babies. These mice would have been born completely black, but scientists have altered their genes. And it doesn't stop with mice. All these animals have been genetically engineered, and the debate about genetic engineering on humans is hotting up. Designer babies are moving out of the science fiction books. How far they become reality is our choice. The science is almost with us.
Artificial insemination for single women involves the woman making a choice that she is going to have as man-free a child as is technically possible. I question whether that is in the child's best interests. A child is not an accessory. We don't have a right to have a child. Bringing up a child is a difficult and demanding business, and we ought, if possible, not to choose to exclude the other half of the human race. That means that the child so conceived deliberately has been denied knowledge of his or her father, and I don't think that's right.
The fact that I was able to do this has made my life completely fulfilled. I wouldn't say it's the type of thing every single young woman should try and pursue. It just so happens that it was right for me at a certain point in my life, and it's worked out wonderfully. I have 4 sons now, 3 of which were conceived through the artificial insemination method, and we're all one big happy family.
I'm not frightfully keen on single women having artificial insemination. I believe that they will ask for it perhaps more than they have, and they are asking for it. I don't think it makes much difference whether those single women are actually lesbian couples or whether they're literally single. In either case, I think their children may have quite a hard time in future, and I think people ought to think about the child and not about their own passionate wish to have a child.
It's going to be difficult, I'm sure, when she gets into school and fills out those forms that say mother, father, and she doesn't have anything to write in the father slot. But and I'm sure that it's going to be difficult when her teachers say to her, you must have a father, and she really doesn't. But that's something that we'll deal with when the time comes, and we put a lot of thought into it, how we're going to deal with it.
This is a super mouse. It's twice as big as its parents. After the female's egg had been fertilized by the male's sperm in the normal way, scientists took the egg and injected it with a new growth gene. The new gene tells the egg to grow into a bigger mouse. Using this technique, farmers can genetically engineer their animals to make them more productive. Machines are already beavering away, mass-producing all these new genes. But does this mean that humans can be genetically engineered?
The real problem for humans are basically engineering problems rather than scientific breakthroughs, conceptual problems. But there's a much more basic problem than the science for making perfect babies. The problem is that we don't know necessarily what are good genes and what are bad genes. And even beyond that, there's no way set up for somebody to choose what would be a good gene and what would be a bad gene. And to whom will we give the right to say what would be a good gene and what would be a bad gene?
I don't think that there will be any difficulty in deciding which is a good gene and a bad gene, provided that the medical profession, along with parents and other lay people, agree what diseases are both intolerable and, at the moment, not capable of being cured when the baby has been born. Now, I know that there will be difficulties when we get to lesser diseases like certain kinds of asthma or a tendency to obesity, to getting too fat. then it may be dubious whether we should actually intervene or simply let the baby be born with these tendencies. That, I think, is something which will have to be decided, probably ultimately by Parliament.
Obviously, the characteristics could be altered for the good, but they could also be altered for frivolous or even bad reasons. I don't think it's a good enough reason, for example, to say, I want a blue-eyed child, so therefore I will alter the genetic makeup of the child. It is possible, and this isn't just science fiction imagining, that an unscrupulous person could so manipulate the genetic makeup of all numbers of human beings that you could produce a kind of passive race of people who would do what they were told.
These frogs have been made by transplanting the nucleus of a cell of a tadpole into eggs of normal frogs. These 9 individuals, same sex, and they're identical to each other. If one could do the same experiment with humans, and at the moment we clearly cannot, it would be like creating 9 copies of an individual.
To make these identical frogs, which are copies of only one parent, they took the eggs that had been laid by an ordinary green frog, and before any male frog had fertilized them, they placed them under ultraviolet light. This kills each egg's nucleus, which contains the green frog's genes. A cell is then taken from the gut of a white or albino tadpole. The nucleus of this gut cell is sucked up into a tiny pipette and is injected into the green frog's egg. Some of the injected eggs start to divide as if they'd been fertilized in the normal way. Eventually, they become new albino tadpoles. These develop into white frogs, which shows that they're copies of the albino tadpoles and not the green frog whose eggs were used. Imagine 9 identical people like you created from your gut cells. Although this can't be done now, could it happen in the future?
In principle, it probably could be done. And the reason for saying that is that the results of these nuclear transplantation experiments, which we've described, is that nearly all cells have the complete range of genes needed for bringing about normal development. So that if the methods were developed in the future, I think it's possible that humans could be cloned.
It would, of course, be perfectly possible to make carbon copy clones of humans, just as it is for frogs. But Parliament has already decided that that is actually a criminal offence. I think that they were right, and that it would be a moral outrage to an enormous number of people.
I think this is a horrendous possibility, because it cannot be done for any sensible or good or just end. Why would anybody want to manufacture any number of identical people?
I don't think there is a danger that we could end up with large numbers of Einsteins and Hitlers, and that's for the following reason. A large part of the characteristics of an individual depend upon their experience, what they've learnt during their life, and the interactions they have with others. So if it were, for example, possible to have many different Einsteins being produced today, it is by no means certain that they would follow the same life career as the famous Einstein which we know about did.
This newly born child has inherited red hair like his father. He's been born at a revolutionary time in human biology. Geneticists around the world are working to identify all the genes in the human body. Decisions about our inheritance take place long before birth, at fertilization. Packaged in the nucleus of every human cell are 23 pairs of chromosomes. One of each is from the mother, the other from the father. Each chromosome is made up of bands of genes, and these give us our characteristics. Genes are made up of a chemical called DNA. Each cell in our body contains about 2 meters of DNA, which holds the recipe of life. Its vital ingredients are just 4 different chemicals, called A, G, C, and T. They're in pairs. A always opposite T, and G always opposite C. The pairs are like rungs on a ladder, which is in a spiral. It's the order in which the rungs are arranged which gives us our characteristics. For instance, the rungs in the genes for producing red hair will be in a different order from those of brown hair. The pattern of the rungs on all of the DNA in a single cell of our body is known as the human genome. The human genome is 3,000 million letters long. There is now a plan to read all the letters in the recipe of life and write them down. Until recently, this was unthinkable, but now that goal is in sight. A Human Genome Project has been set up.
The Genome Project is probably the biggest organized biology project that's ever been undertaken. It's a multinational project with over a dozen nations actually involved in the work right now.
The Human Genome Project is in its early days. To write down all 3,000 million letters in the recipe would take until early next century to complete. Once the recipe has been written down, scientists will be able to check our DNA against it and find out which faulty genes we've inherited from our parents. We all inherit 5 or 6 faulty genes. They don't cause most of us any trouble, but a few babies inherit a combination which will make them ill. There are over 4,000 genetic illnesses or diseases, and knowing the right recipe of life could help us treat those babies before they're born.
The scenario for the future, say 20 to 30 years from now, would be that we would then go and get eggs from the woman, and then we would use the right copy, the good gene, and inject it into the eggs. Then we would get sperm from the male, and in a petri dish, in glass, we would do an in vitro fertilization. Then we would watch the various repaired embryos that had been fertilized develop, and after they had progressed to a certain stage, we could check and make sure that they all had the right gene in them. We could then say to the couple, well, would you like triplets? Do you want twins? Would you just want a single child? And that would determine how many embryos we implanted. The woman would then carry these or this embryo for the rest of the term, and at the end deliver 1, 2, 3 happy, healthy babies.
A free information leaflet to accompany this series has been sent to schools. If you'd like extra copies, please contact BBC Education Information on the usual number 081 746 1111.